It was very clear at Big 12 Media Days that the Kansas State Wildcats are ready to bury the 2024 season and one that slipped through their fingers. The wheels fall off, whatever you want to say, and never look back. And while we're at it, there's another lingering narrative that needs to be left behind as well. That K State doesn't have the firepower out wide to hang with the best in the Big 12. Today, we're talking about wide receivers. We're talking about Jaron Tibbs. We're talking about Avery Johnson having a full-blown arsenal now. And we're breaking down what Chris Klieman said in Frisco. That should have every Wildcat fan fired up for fall. Let's get into it right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers, and thank you so much for helping us get to 1,000 subscribers. We did it in the middle of July. We are over a month out before we get to Dublin, and we hit that milestone. So thank you so much for joining us and joining this adventure that we get to do every single day. We got a lot to talk about today. We're talking wide receivers, as I mentioned, and talking more about media days, catching up on all the stuff that happened in Frisco last week. You know what struck out to me more than anything in those Big 12 media days last week? You know, we talked offensive line yesterday. The left tackle scenario was quite interesting, and I really want to see what George Fitzpatrick does. But Chris Klieman had a bunch of great nuggets when he talked in his press conferences, breakouts, some of the one-on-ones with some of the other medias. But he didn't just sound excited, right? He didn't just sound excited. He sounded confident, and I love that. He didn't sound like a coach that just coached in the Rate Bowl, that just lost his co-offensive coordinator / offensive line coach to the Dallas Cowboys. He didn't sound worried, and he shouldn't. The position group, though, that he spotlighted with the most conviction wasn't the tight ends, who is the best tight end group in the country, in my opinion, and other opinions as well. It wasn't Avery Johnson, although he did talk a lot about Avery Johnson, and for good reason. It wasn't even the defensive line, who brings probably the most veteranship to the entire defensive group of Kansas State, which we're going to dig into more on Farmageddon Friday tomorrow. No, it was the wide receiver room. The wide receiver room got the most conviction from Chris Klieman. Klieman said flat out that this is the most talented wide receiver room that he has had in the 7 seasons at Kansas State. Since he has arrived at Manhattan, this is the best, most talented wide receiver room he has had. Now, there's usually a little bit of hyperbole when it comes to media days. We see that across the spectrum. It's not just K-State. It's not just Deion Sanders of Colorado talking about thinking his team's better without a Heisman Trophy winner on both sides of the football. There's a little bit of hyperbole, but this makes a lot of sense. This is something that we've been talking about for quite some time, and now we're hearing it from the head coach, reiterating that this wide receiver room is going to be huge for that next step that Kansas State needs. So let's break down why that matters and why it might finally kill that old talking point that K-State just can't recruit or develop elite wideouts in the transfer portal. First, let's talk about that transfer portal, and that's Purdue transfer Jaron Tibbs. He has been creating buzz from the second he arrived in Manhattan, and you might not get all the warm and fuzzies when you think of a Purdue transfer, because Purdue was just absolutely terrible, probably the worst Power 4 school in college football last year. But that highlight catch he had in spring ball last year wasn't just for the cameras. I mean, he's been stacking days, stacking wins day in and day out. And at 6'3", we again talk about how important it's going to be to have that size for Kansas State at the wide receiver. We haven't really had that, the 6'3", and he's just one of those big guys that come over. Jaron Bradley being another one, with the product of Boston College / Texas Tech. But you get this Power 4 experience coming into Kansas State and Jaron Tibbs. And we heard a lot of love from the head coaches and the players about Jaron Tibbs at 6'3" with Big Ten experience and real body control. Tibbs gives you that reliable wide receiver 2 opposite of Jayce Brown. And this could be really a true breakout year for a guy like Tibbs, who only saw about 25 catches last year at Purdue, just over 300 yards receiving. And yeah, that might not sound like a lot, especially from a team that was god awful, but you got to feel the fit makes a lot of sense here. Klieman didn't just single him out. He praised the entire wide receiver room. I will say that as the deepest and most talented he's had since arriving in 2019. It was really more of the other players that hyped Tibbs. And we're going to get to that in just a second. Klieman doesn't hype unless he means it. That's what I have learned since covering Kansas State here on Locked On Kansas State, just from covering college football as a whole in my almost decade of sports journalist just coverage across all of sports, college, NFL, baseball, you name it. But what I've learned from Chris Klieman, from his run in 2022 to the Big 12 championship, all the way to what we've done this deep coverage here in this past 6-7 months plus, he doesn't hype unless he means it. He isn't one to throw around praise and just fill space at the podium. He's not one to do that. He speaks very candidly, and he's not afraid to answer some of these questions. And if he doesn't want to answer, he'll tell you straight up he's not going to answer a certain question, and we'll usually explain why. So when he says that this is the best wide receiver room I've had, and quote, he said, this is the best wide receiver room I've had, that hits different. He mentioned not just talent either, but football IQ, work ethic, chemistry. That tells you a lot of things, not just something of production. It tells you that this group is cohesive, folks. They're not just athletes. They are locked in. And that is exciting stuff when you are looking for the small things to get momentum on and get excited about before you hit fall camp and before Dublin is right around the corner, before it sneaks up on you. It's right there. It is right there. Think about how long Kansas State has had this question mark when it comes to the wide receiver room. How long, like as a whole? And last year, of course, when it comes to the transfer portal guys and how they didn't pan out, we're going to talk about that in a second. Now, between Tibbs, Jared Bradley, you can even put Caleb Medford in this conversation, and the return/retention, whatever you want to say, of Jayce Brown, this group may have gone from liability to a huge weapon, maybe one of the best, biggest weapons overnight. I saw a tweet that came out the other day. It was a Arizona State group. It was on social media. I don't even know exactly who it was, but they were ranking the Big 12 position groups. And on the offensive side, Kansas State was either 1, 2, or 3 somewhere, including the wide receivers. Kansas State found themselves towards the top of the wide receivers in the Big 12. After having a rough year as a wide receiver group, not only are we feeling the same way about these wide receiver transfers, some of these peers in other teams, other programs inside the conference feel the same way. Sprinkle in a promising freshman class, and no wonder Chris Klieman and the rest of his coaching staff are excited. But here's the kicker. They don't need to carry the offense. They just need to win their matchups, because there's just so much greatness about this offense. The offense looks like a strength as a whole. Klieman's tone said all in. He believes in this 2025 offense. And why shouldn't he? With everything that's around him, with Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson, they give you explosive options in the backfield. The tight end room is elite, as I mentioned. I think it's the best in the country. If we're going back to that conversation I just had about those Big 12 position rankings, they had Utah at number 1. That's absolutely egregious. I might have an entire show explaining why that's wrong in the near future. But we're talking national level good, the best in the country in the tight end room. And then Avery Johnson has taken a leap in his junior season, talking about how he's not only just a guy that is taking the reins for the first time, he's a leader. He is the leader of this offense, and the wide receiver group now complements his style instead of limiting it. That 8-4 finish stings. A 7-1 start that went up in smoke. That team admitted they let Houston loss linger. Of course it did. No one expected that Houston loss to happen. The phrase we keep using for the Houston loss is the wheels fell off after that. Of course they let it linger. And they're not dwelling on it anymore. That is something that they really focused on. They're not dwelling on it anymore. They're learning from it. That's the tone out of Frisco. Turn pain into performance. I absolutely love that. Chris Klieman is not just hopeful. He's expecting this wide receiver room to be a difference maker. And if he's right, folks, this offense, if this offense clicks the way it's built to, then the Big 12 is about to find out why Kansas State doesn't just run the ball and play defense anymore. It's not one that you just have to hand off to DJ Giddens because he was the best player on the field. No, there is multiple weapons that you can do that for. So lots to be excited about for this wide receiver room. Coming up next, let's zoom in on the man who's made the loudest noise this offseason. That is Jaron Tibbs, and why it's time to bury the narrative that Kansas State can't win with portal wide receivers right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, let's talk about our friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I mean, we're heading into the second half of the MLB season. Perfect time to head to FanDuel and pick who will make it to the World Series, maybe the playoffs, win the divisions, you name it. There are a lot of good races. Where will those Royals finish? Can they win the AL Central? Perfect time to get with your friends at FanDuel if you think that they can do it. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with this new thing, these new daily promotions. It's a fun way to bet. And with the interface they have, it's just nice. It's a nice app to be on, and it really gets you excited about watching those games when you're sitting down and doing it anyway. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5, and with $150 in bonus bets, you can win those if those first bet wins. So open up the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Talking Kansas State wide receivers, and Jaron Tibbs didn't just show up quietly in the transfer portal and sneak onto this roster. He has been the guy this offseason, the name that keeps getting mentioned at every turn when we talk about this wide receiver group. And we continue to talk about the size and how exciting that's going to be for Avery Johnson, for maybe trying to fix some of those throwing errors that they had, having a bigger target share, a bigger target radius. Well, that's just one thing to get excited about. We saw, obviously, his excellent catches in spring, but this segment isn't just going to be about one player. It's about changing the way we view receiver transfers at Kansas State. I talked about how they want to put that 8-4 season in the past. Well, we also, as fans, need to put this narrative in the past as well. We need to just get it behind us, that this transfer thing won't work. Because we are hearing it over and over again that this is the best wide receiver room that Chris Klieman has ever seen. And I don't think we should have this narrative about these three transfer wide receivers thinking they're not going to work out just because it didn't in the past. Avery Johnson said it best in Frisco when he's speaking of Tibbs, because teammates and coaches are all in on Tibbs. He said, quote, "He's going to be a dude for us this year." I mean, he was flat out simple, sweet and simple with it. But that's not lip service, folks. That's your quarterback one, your QB1, already locking in on his new, potentially wide receiver 2. Who knows? Wide receiver 1, I doubt that. He's got a great relationship with Jayce Brown, but mismatches could happen. Jayce Brown, we could see him in a different type of form. We saw him doing some crazy things in the Rate Bowl. That speed and size of Jaron Tibbs could make him one of the best wide receivers from Kansas State. He might be the wide receiver 2 in the eyes of like routes, but maybe he leads the team in yards because of the deep threat. Who knows? Tibbs impressed with a viral spring catch, and that's really what's something that we got to see. But more importantly, he's shown consistency. We keep hearing how he's shown consistency. At Purdue, he had flashes, yes, and you can really talk about those flashes. How exciting are those flashes when Purdue acted like the flashes of Kent State? You know, they really weren't exciting last year any way, shape, or form. They were the worst team in the Power Four. But at Kansas State, he's getting a green light and a bigger role, and that's something that you should be excited about. When you're coming from one of the worst programs in the P4, and you had a smaller role than what you're expected to have at Kansas State, a team that's battling for Big 12 title contentions and college football playoff contentions, and a team that needed help at the wide receiver room, and you're going to get a bigger role, that should show you that this guy is special. That should absolutely show you that he's a real fit, not a lottery ticket. In past years, portal wide receivers felt like dart throws. It really did, especially last year. But sometimes they clicked, sometimes they didn't. Last year, it didn't really work out. I think that's changed. I think we can say that's changed. And obviously, I'm not blind to the fact of where we are sitting in the middle of July. I am well aware where we are at right now. We're in the middle of July. We just hit 1,000 subscribers at Locked On Kansas State. But the staff has earned the benefit of the doubt in my mind. And I'm here to hopefully make you feel the same way if you're not right now. The culture of this team and this wide receiver room, this offense is strong. The retention rates prove it. Jayce Brown came back. Sure, Trey Spivey headed out. He took off. That was something that we wanted to see. But I think we're in a better spot than we are right now than we would have been if that would have happened. That scenario would have happened. Good players want to play for Chris Klieman and his staff. And K-State is identifying true fits, not just talent. That's something that I'm going to stress, I think, for the remainder of my time while I'm the host of this show. It doesn't matter the stars and whatever it is when you're recruiting rank. We just saw somebody jump 800 spots to go over that BYU quarterback, Lyons, the 5-star guy, who was a 3-star, just got jumped into a 5-star and jumped 800 spots because of where he committed. That just happened 2 days ago. Not Kansas State, but it affected the Big 12. It doesn't matter about those recruiting things. It matters about fit. And Chris Klieman and his recruiting staff, and that recruiting staff does a great job when it comes to the transfer portal as well, does a fantastic job at identifying true fits to help Avery Johnson in this offense step up. Tibbs' effect on the wide receiver room. When Jaron Tibbs steps on that field, it opens things up. Jayce Brown won't face as many bracket coverages. It lets him allow to do those possible jet sweeps, go underneath, maybe get a mismatch. Those tight ends get more single coverage. I mean, who knows what's going to happen when the red zone happens, right? The red zone is going to be an absolute danger zone anywhere on the field for Avery Johnson to either throw or run himself or hand it off to Dylan Edwards or Joe Jackson or Antonio Martin. Even the run game benefits. I love it because you can't stack the box if you're worried about the perimeter and a guy like 6'3" Jaron Tibbs or Jared Bradley are on the outside doing their thing. It's time to stop fearing wide receiver transfers. For too long, the narrative has been wide receivers don't work out here. Last year, it didn't work out. I understand that, but that is over now. I'm calling it. I'm manifesting it. Whatever the case it has to be, the coaching staff has shown to know how to evaluate, coach, and maximize transfer talent because we are seeing it this spring. And we're going to see it this fall, and we're going to see it right away in Dublin. It's going to happen. This is a program that targets guys who fits the system, the culture, and the mission. And that mission is to get back to Arlington, win this dang thing, this Big 12 championship for the first time since 2022, and to get into the college football playoffs. That is the mission. You can't tell me otherwise. Tibbs' new standard is not the expectation. I am super excited for a guy like Jaron Tibbs, and it makes me even more excited that he's getting the love that we were hoping that happened in Frisco. That means that he's doing all the right things. It's not just a promising addition, folks. He's a signal that the tide has turned when it comes to these portal guys. And I could be completely wrong. Might as well put that out there. I could. I don't think I am. If you're still judging Kansas State wide receivers based on 2023 or 2024, you're already behind. And when you pair this upgraded wide receiver room with Avery Johnson's breakout year that's going to happen, you get what we're talking about next. An offense that could light the Big 12 on fire right here on Locked On Kansas State. Here's the truth. Avery Johnson doesn't need to take over anymore because the offense around him is built to share the load and elevate him. Between a better offensive coordinator, better weapons, and the confidence of his head coach, everything is pointing to a massive 2025 leap. Klieman loves this offense. Every position is a strength. Klieman's words from Frisco were loud. They were loud and clear. He's confident in the building. He's confident in development, confident in the roster building, and confident in his quarterback. I love what he felt about Matt Wells as well. And I want to talk about Matt Wells in just a minute, but nearly every position group on offense was praised by Coach Klieman, especially the skill spots. And who's going to benefit the most from that? That's Avery Johnson. This is a unit that expects to take a significant, a huge step forward, not just stay afloat. That's 7-1. That wasn't a fluke. That is the expectation. Now you got to do it again this season with a chip on your shoulder and start season play against the Big 12, one of your non-conference games against the Big 12 opponent. You got a tough road to get there, but you will. This season, Kansas State will do so. Matt Wells calling the plays changes everything, in my opinion. We got that small taste in the Rape Bowl, but let's be real. Last year's offense didn't always have that rhythm, right? There were multiple games. Arizona State game for one, where Avery Johnson threw an interception on the second play of the game. Now Avery Johnson says Wells knows how to get him in a groove, and Coach Klieman even said how important it is that these two are just have such a great relationship. They're in the room together all the time. They're talking about plays. They are just having a fantastic relationship. And as an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach, and already having the experience of doing what he's done in the past with guys like Jordan Love, who was when he was the head coach at Utah State. Now, of course, Jordan Love, the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, gets you excited for what he can do for Avery Johnson in his second full season as the starting quarterback for the Wildcats. He brings a level of familiarity and trust to Avery Johnson. I mean, how much was that there last year? It's your first year as a starting quarterback. You're trying to do everything right. You're really not trying to lose your job. Avery Johnson doesn't have to worry about that now. This is his team. That kind of bond doesn't just help in game. It bonds confidence week to week. It helps not only with just Avery Johnson, but the rest of the offense. When your quarterback is humming, everybody else is completely on par. They're ready to go. With that backfield, Dylan Edwards, Joe Jackson, you got speed and power, thunder and lightning. We've talked about it all the time. But you add Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, and Joe Jackson, you have just those three. If they're firing in all cylinders, that's just as good as having DJ Giddens in the backfield like you had last year. Now you're adding those wide receivers with Tibbs, Bradley, Jayce Brown returning. We'll see what Caleb Medford does, the other transfer in the mix. Haven't heard a lot about him. It's mostly about Tibbs and Bradley because of the size. But who knows? Is Medford a special teams guy, or does he actually make some chance, some spots? We'll see. Haven't heard a lot about him. Maybe that'll be something we talk about in fall camp. And, of course, tight end, still a top tier nationally. Again, I think they're the best tight end room, at least in the Big 12. I'll go out and say the country. Led the entire country in red zone touchdowns last year. There's a reason for that. Draft tight ends into the NFL. There's a reason for that. You promote your tight end coach, the offensive line coach. There's a reason for that. Avery Johnson doesn't have to just play hero ball. He doesn't have to do that this year. There were some times he had to do that last year. We all know it. And some of that times got him, I think, injured. Can't tell me he wasn't 100% after that Colorado game. Can't tell me, because I just know he wasn't. He can distribute and let the athletes work for him, for Chris Klieman, for Matt Wells, and for the entire Kansas State team. And that's what's going to get them back to 7-1 or even better and get them back to Arlington. That's what's going to do it. The offensive line is the final piece of the puzzle. And we talked about that yesterday. Not a lot of returning starters, but George Fitzpatrick is emerging big. We talked about that as a whole half-hour episode yesterday at the offensive line, so check that out if you want to. But the interior continuity is helping, obviously, with the center of Sam Heck. The tackles need to mesh quickly. George Fitzpatrick already doing a great thing, stepping up in the depth chart, becoming that top left tackle. But there's still question marks of who will remain on the rest of the starting offensive line. Seems like good question marks because it's competition. It's not scratching our heads and wondering what we're going to do. If the line holds up and there's no weak link in the offense, I mean, where do you go wrong on this offensive side? I just don't understand, how can you not be excited about this offense at the moment? They are way ahead of the defense, and that's fine. That's fine. Right now, in the middle of July, August 23rd, if it's still a problem, then we got some issues. Most around the program do agree that the offense is more settled in right now, and that might be something to do with injuries, might be to do something with the fact they have to replace so many secondary players that headed to the NFL. I'm not sure. We'll talk about that in a later episode, but what that means is the offense needs to lead early, set the tone, and carry the load in September, in August, week 0, and hope the defense catches up if that's what it takes. Hopefully that's not what it takes, but if so, that's just one more thing that Avery Johnson's got to put on his shoulders. I think he's got the strength to do it. Avery Johnson has the weapons. He has the coordinator. He has the confidence of his team and his coach. And in 2025, the Big 12 is going to find out what happens when everything finally clicks for Kansas State's QB1. I love it. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kansas State. Hey, if you're not bought in to this offense, I don't know what else you need. The pieces are here. The belief is here. And the team's going to come out swinging in Dublin against Iowa State, against those Cyclones. Speaking of that, we'll be here tomorrow, Farmageddon Friday. Nick Maravitz and I are going to break it down. We're going to talk defensive line, defensive ends. We're going to talk about that on tomorrow's episode of Farmageddon Friday. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you follow, rate, subscribe, wherever you get your podcast. Drop your thoughts on YouTube and let me know. I want to hear this. Do you believe that this is the best wide receiver room in the Chris Klieman era? And how big of a jump are you expecting from Avery Johnson in 2025? And you think Jaron Tibbs, can he be wide receiver 2? And are you happy if Jaron Tibbs is wide receiver 2? Lots of questions. Throw it up in the comments. I'd love to answer them back as we get into Farmageddon Friday on our next episode. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll be back here tomorrow with more breakdowns as we count down the fall camp right here on Locked On Kansas State.